Well, hello everybody and welcome back. This is Deborah Sawaf, your show host on the Power of Words podcast. I am here today. It's Wellness Wednesday and I have with me Marianna Agamirian, who is a licensed family therapist and marriage therapist. But besides that, she's also a really dear friend. And today's talk, I want to say the conversation we're having is very purposeful. And I'd actually like to read your bio. It's beautiful and extensive and on point with our conversation today. So let me go through this. So Marianne is based in Los Angeles, and it's important to know that for anyone that wants to reach out to her. And she draws from a rich multicultural background that spans various corners of the globe. She speaks 3 different languages and values effective communication, attachment, and adaptability. Her journey, unique journey, and family upbringing instilled a profound understanding of the intricate human dynamics and connection, as well as the ongoing evolution of self. She cultivated a deep appreciation of acceptance, a principle she passionately integrates into her therapeutic approach. Marianna's belief in the influential role of culture is evident in her conviction that it assigns us roles and rules to fulfill and follow, providing us with a sense of belonging. Making sense of what is considered good or bad within any culture is a unique process for each individual and each family. I love that, and I love that I have you here with me, and that is exactly what we're going to talk about.
Thank you, Deborah, so much for having me, for trusting me to bring about awareness about such important issues as is mental health. Thank you for creating the platform. And that was a very extensive bio. I'd just like to say, above all else, and most importantly, I'm just an empathetic human being.
And I think that's what we need, right? We need empathy. And I feel like even though, and until I started actually practicing what I do through the power of words, I don't use empathy all the time unless I remind myself. So all of us good human beings have to remember, and we have to remember, what does empathy really mean? Is it just being kind? Is it being compassionate? Is it helping somebody? Is that empathy? But empathy really is walking in someone else's shoes.
Yeah, and sometimes really being kind to yourself too. And that's the most important thing that we forget to do, is be kind to ourselves.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, I think specifically looking at what's going on in the world with youth. And I want to specifically focus on youth because I work with a lot of young people. And what we're seeing now, especially what came to the surface post-COVID, 2 things I want to touch upon. One is youth themselves, and the other is actually how families are handling this. Mm-hmm. And then we can actually go into, the bigger topic about once you're a young adult, where, what control does the family really have over those medical issues. So tell me a little bit about, what do you see as the most prevailing factor or in the mental health scenario with young people? And I'm talking, teenagers and post-teenage years.
Well, the one really is depression, and the number one symptom that comes across is not being social. And this happened before and especially after COVID. So social isolation, a lot of the parents who bring their children into counseling have that as a main complaint, and that becomes a focal point of treatment. But then, it leads into things that are other than mood disorders, like personality disorders and eating disorders. But yeah, depression is the most prevalent that I see in youth.
And we can go into talking about the causes of depression. And I want to say a lot of the isolation that you're talking about is the addiction to technology. And that is such a big conversation to have. But I think I want to focus, I believe that I need topics to discuss with you. But I would like to focus today on, some of the most important areas of mental illnesses among youth. And, we have this confusion between BPD and bipolar disorder. And do you want to touch a little bit on that and maybe go deeper into it? Because a lot of people that have bipolar disorder, I know that you have triggers, you know what's going to bring it on. And I want to see what's the difference really between that and borderline personality disorders.
Sure. The difference between, well, bipolar disorder is an episode, a manic episode, which could last 4 days and on, right? Where you are so elevated and excited, you believe that you can conquer the world. You have these grand ideas of self, right? And elevated mood. You engage in activities that are impulsive, like shopping sprees and reckless driving. And the key here is it lasts about 4 days, and then it has a depressive or hypomanic episode before or after. And that's bipolar disorder, and it is a mood disorder, and it's important to specify.
The manic shopping and the crazy driving, that could very well be me.
But it doesn't go on for days, on end. And also it has to meet the diagnostic criteria, it has to interfere with your social daily functioning. And it is a mood disorder. Borderline personality disorder, as the name suggests, is a personality disorder. And it is one of 10 personality disorders. It belongs to cluster B, which basically is defined by very dramatic and unstable thoughts and moods about oneself. And borderline personality disorder has 9 criteria. One of the most prevalent, the top one, is the fear of abandonment. And it's important to, before I even go more in detail about the definition of what the disorder is, it's important to say most people with the disorder don't think they have a problem because this is the way they think, and the way they think is normal. That is why they don't seek treatment very often. But their lives are affected, and it's important to have empathy for these people because their lives and their are very affected by it. There's true impact. They can't sustain relationships, jobs. Their internal world is chaotic, But going back to the definition, it's not diagnosed until about adulthood because our personality doesn't develop until then. And then after diagnosis, and when I use the term diagnosis, it's important to look at it as a tool to get treatment and not a stigma or a label. It once it's diagnosed, then what happens is either you get treatment through counseling, and there's different approaches. The most evidence-based and researched is DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, and or cognitive behavioral therapy. But it is also very important to know that counseling has to be very consistent on a regular basis. And it needs to happen long-term. Prognosis of this is, it gets better with time and with age, but you have to want it to get better. Now, going back to there are 9. 5 of them are necessary to meet the diagnosis. One of them is fear of abandonment. Most people with this personality disorder are afraid of abandonment. And what that looks like is if, for example, a mother or a husband says, I'm going out to dinner, I'll be back by 9, and it's 9:10 and they're not back yet, the person is really panicking at this point, thinking they're never coming back. The other one is unstable relationships. Like what that might look like is someone will quit a job that's very meaningful and a very good job, and the relationship that was really good. They can't sustain relationships, interpersonal relationships. And yeah, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
No, go ahead.
And then mood swings, which is unstable mood and affective mood. You can go from like in manic, but this can happen within an hour or 2. You can go from cheerful to angry to upset to depressed, and this obviously inconsistency affects your relationships as well. There is such a thing as ideation that's suicidal, like patterns of behavior that are consistent with suicidal ideation or self-harm, and whether or not there is real attempt to, hurt yourself or not, it's sort of like a call for attention, right? Saying, if you think you're going to abandon me, then watch what I'm going to do. Yeah. And if you say, I have a gun, I'm going to pull the trigger, then most people will show up for you, right? How many have I covered? Let's see. And then another one of them is having affective instability and angry outbursts. So a normal person might react normally and walk past some remark that's rude or nice without bursting into anger. But if they, so much as they don't like the way you looked at them, they'll become very upset. And by anger, I'm throwing stuff, being very verbally and physically abusive. So these are things that make it very, very difficult. Yeah, very difficult.
Wow. Okay. Now, me as a parent of, teenage and post-teenage kids, I mean, I have so many issues to talk about. If you don't realize exactly, if you can't diagnose this disorder until they're adults or until they're young adults, then what am I as a parent going through when this starts to surface? So am I just saying my child has a bad attitude, she's having tantrums, or he's having tantrums, he's badly behaved, he is, whatever, verbally abusive? How do I handle that at home? I mean, if it triggers, like you said, any time, as a parent, you're walking on eggshells all the time, and you don't know what to expect.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought this up, because it is important to address the issues of parenting and family members and the family system altogether. It is difficult. It's difficult not knowing the uncertainty, the helplessness. Most parents think that they have failed as parents, and in reality, they haven't. Yeah. And there is a lot of stigma and shame attached to that as well. It's important for parents to know it is not their fault, and there is not anything that they could do to change it or makes it their responsibility. The disorder itself is unknown. The causes are very unknown. It could be inherited characteristics, or it could be environmental factors.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but it makes me really emotional to just imagine, because so many people, you see so many people. That's one thing, okay? So I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
Just thoughts coming to my head. Now, this is one thing, handling it within the home. What about other siblings? How are the siblings handling it? More importantly, and something that I talk a lot about, and which is why I actually created the Power of Seven, is so that community, and when I say community, young adults, teenagers, pre-teenagers, can start to understand the emotions of their peers. Because not understanding what your peers are going through, what you said in the beginning, the isolation that happens with depression, when kids start to isolate. Now, if you already understand the emotions that you're expressing through the Power of Seven, you are able to understand that your friends are going through something. You see that isolation happen before the teacher sees it because of the academics. Before the tantrums happen, you start to see the first signs of any mental illness, right? The peers are the first to see it. And we're not trained or taught to look for that. Right. And that is what we're teaching through emotional intelligence. And I can't imagine the amount of families that have gone through this process thinking their kids have ADHD or some kind of other disorder, when it's probably much more serious. And by the time you realize that they've been on all different kinds of treatments, because we really don't know. Mm-hmm. How do you teach society, which is what I'm trying to get too with what we do. How do you teach society to behave? Once upon a time, when kids with autism were out and had an episode, people around didn't understand, and then there was a stigma to that. Then everyone started to talk about autism, and now when you see somebody, you say, oh my gosh, I feel so sorry for them. But families don't need your sympathy and don't need your compassion. They need you to really understand the illness. And now that we're starting to talk about borderline personality disorder, which is probably the worst of mental health illnesses, how do you talk to society? How do you talk to the people that you haven't had a chance to share what your family is going through, because your family's been struggling and dealing with this? How do you talk to society? How do you teach society about that?
That's the $1 million question. There's a saying, how many therapists does it take to change someone? It says one if they want to. So society has to just, be willing to learn and accept and understand, like you said. And once they understand, the best thing that would come out of it is there will be less misdiagnosis and less inappropriate treatments, right? A lot of kids are misdiagnosed, and then treated for issues or bipolar issues, when in reality they don't have that. And yes, anxiety, bipolar, depression, substance abuse can be co-occurring disorders, but they're not always the same, or they don't always coexist. So once we learn what this is, it's important to have the society and the family on board, everyone willing to understand this. And I think what you're doing with the Power of 7 is creating, I think if people understand how important it is to understand emotion and identify the emotion, then they can show up more, right? So if, for example, someone with borderline personality disorder is feeling the need to, feeling alone that day, right? Lonely, and they need some compassion, they could just wear that band and show their family members that they need a hug today. This way they don't feel the fear of abandonment, they don't feel alone anymore. And if we can make this a global, I'm going to say that, a global treatment modality, then it would help massively. But yes, educating and psychoeducating society, lifting the stigma, that then you're enabling parents to pay attention more to the siblings who also need help.
Absolutely.
It's so necessary to give your love, attention, and upbringing, everything to also other kids.
Absolutely.
Not just the one who is diagnosed.
We had lunch just to, last week, just to catch up, because we've been trying to do this, I travel, you travel. But I think that led to so many things, and especially topics like these, because I know there are so many families, and we're not, the Power of Words is so new, but we do have so many multicultural groups that are attached and that follow us, whether it's from the fashion brand. And I would love to get this out to parents that actually have kids. When your kids are young and they have tantrums, just wait it out before we're in a hurry to get them treatment or diagnose them as ADHD or whatever. I don't doubt that everybody needs medical help. You need therapists, you need the apps, you need all of that. But also for society, looking at what's going on and looking at these things that happen. I mean, kids don't want to be that. They don't want to be the one that disrupts the classroom, but it just happens. So we have to give some thought to how we so quickly. So, I think my having lunch with you just brought this topic up, and I said, oh my gosh, I need to have you, because I want you to come out and talk about these things, because through you sharing this, the others that suffer know that they're not alone. And I can promise you, from just the people that I know and just the kids that I know, that there are millions out there that have been dealing with these issues. Parents and families, walk on eggshells, like they say.
And this is amazing that you're saying that. Phrase is actually very used with this disorder specifically, because you never know when the next blow up is going to be, when the next angry outburst is going to be, right? It's almost unpredictable. So it causes almost neurosis in someone who doesn't know how to react and respond to it. That's why it's important for parents and loved ones to engage in their own counseling, to fill your own cup, do whatever is necessary for your self-care, a massage every week, or a lunch with one of your friends. Do that. Fill your cup first, because it is not an easy task taking care of, or just living with someone, even in the next room. It's so important to do that.
Yeah.
And society makes a difference, It makes such a big difference. We don't need as much medication to treat these disorders as we do compassion and the support
and love and support, and just saying I'm here for you, and just understanding when it happens. Just stop and leave it be.
Just understanding that they didn't ask for this, and most of the angry outbursts is not directed outwards; it's inwards. It's like they don't know who they are. They ask. That's another thing, is they don't know who they are. You'll find people with borderline personality disorder constantly changing their hair color or getting tattoos, body alterations. They don't know who they are. They're trying to discover a purpose. They feel empty inside. So if you can just be compassionate towards that. The fear of abandonment, it can be because either there was some sort of trauma or abuse in their past. We don't know what causes it, but it's important to know it is not their fault and they didn't ask for it.
You brought up, can this be brought on by trauma or abuse?
It can be triggered by it, especially the fear of abandonment. It can.
Amazing. Okay, so now we talk about borderline personality disorder. Let's talk a little bit about why do so many people get confused between bipolar and borderline? And I know we touched on bipolar a little bit.
Well, they get confused because they share similar traits, which is, the mood swings, ups and downs. But like I said earlier, the bipolar is an episode, a manic episode, where you're on, if you will imagine, on a high for a few days. You may not even need any sleep. Yeah. But borderline, is kind of like who you are. It's a pattern of chronic behavior and thought process that is with you your entire life. So it's like it's almost saying, going from one extreme to another, like idealizing someone, saying, Marianna is the best therapist in the world, and then one day Marianna is late to an appointment for a minute, and she's the worst, and she's trying to mess up your entire psyche. You will write a Yelp review, like going from that extreme to another within a matter of minutes or hours. So that's basically the difference, is the timing.
Wow. So it would be, such a gift to be able to actually teach kids from a young age how to deal with this, because that's where it starts. You start to see the signs when you're together, right? You see the first signs in school, I want to say. And just for young parents to know that, for parents with young kids to know that this might happen, because we're not talking about this a lot.
Right. To know that this might happen, and there are resources, there are community-based support groups that you can, engage in, get counseling, that you don't have to go through this alone. And it's more prevalent than we think. More so in girls, by the way.
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
More so in girls.
I did not realize that. Well, this was wonderful. I mean, we touched on one topic again today, not again, because this is our second talk with this. The first one was at lunch, but I can't wait to talk to you again and touch on other topics. And you are not alone. This is not something that you have to go through as a family alone, but reach out to, if you're going through something like this, reach out to your friends. It's okay to be. We did not want to talk about cancer at one time. We didn't want to talk about autism at one time. And now we're just talking about everything. Why can't we talk about mental well-being, mental health issues? That's just like everything else.
It's like the unknown. The things we don't know about, they're always hush-hush.
Yes.
But once we talk about it
They scare us
enough, we realize that this is just an everyday thing. Thank you, Deborah, for having me once again, and for sharing my compassion and my bias in knowing that mental health is important. Thank you.
It is the most important because we all have our mental health moments, right? We always say, the human mind goes through 2,400 emotions a day, and we're up and down and up and down, and we can just cruise those emotions with positivity and know there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and wear your positive emotion and, to help you focus to get through the day with positivity. So thank you for being that positive light at the end of the tunnel and drawing us towards you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
And we will see you again, and another topic, another time, another Wellness Wednesday. Thank you all for joining us today. I appreciate you, and Andy Waldman, thank you for having us and always hosting us with a smile. Appreciate you, Studio Place. Marianna,
thank you.
Have a great rest of your week.
You as well.